Hey, welcome to the HCRP studios. I'm Vlad Davidiak, and I work for the Harris County Republican Party as the communications director. I'm joined today in the studio by John Luman. He's a candidate for HISD trustee for District 7. The election is going to be this upcoming November. Early voting starts Monday, October 23rd. John Luman, welcome to the HCRP studio.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
A lot of people have really been expressing a lot of interest in these races, specifically when it comes to the education issue. You're one of three candidates who received an endorsement from the HCRP. The candidates committee and the executive committee reviewed not only your voting record, your stance on issues, your platform, the things that you want to do, and reached a conclusion that this is a person that, as a party, we want to support and we want everyone to know. So you're only one of three who got that.
Well, thank you very much. Very much appreciated.
It's one of those things where people need to know who to support in these elections, because, especially for people who have parents, parents who have kids, I mean, they have a vested interest in the education of their kids, and you've taken a very active interest in this particular position because this isn't your first time running.
It's not my first
HISD.
time. Correct.
So I guess let's do an introduction to these people who are watching. Who are you? What brought you to this race, and what is it that you'd like to do?
Sure. So thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. The party's been very supportive. Last year I ran for the same position and came up a little bit short, 37 points short, but we're on and moving on. And let me tell you a little bit about myself. My parents, my mom has an 8th grade education. My dad had a high school education. I'm a first-generation college graduate. All 4 of their children, I'm the youngest, went to college, and public education was a big deal for us. And my parents, while not having an education, recognized that that was the way forward. I feel the same way. I have an undergraduate degree in engineering, a master's in mechanical engineering, and then a law degree. So my parents knew that college could be fun, apparently, because I spent a lot of time there and had a good time. And it got 3 degrees from it. I'm a lawyer here in town. Worked as an engineer beforehand. I worked on a weapons program and then became a lawyer. So education's important. And then, I've lived in Houston in the same area for about 20-something years, 22 years. And I have 2 children who have started in the public school system. And I got involved with their schools, and my wife did too. My wife's very active, volunteers. I did the same thing. Became the Dad's Club president at my kids' school, and then started talking with folks about the issues. And Harvin Moore stepped down a year early. Mm-hmm. Last year he stepped down the 3rd year of his 4-year term, and I talked with some folks, and they asked me to run, and thought long and hard about it, and talked with folks, prayed about it, and ran. And so, yes, this is my 3rd time running for this in a year. We had the big general election where there was 3 other candidates, total of 4 candidates, and then there became a runoff. Yeah. And so the runoff was in December. And then I wasn't sure I was going to be back and running again, but folks asked me to, and then there was a series of votes by the person who won that really were head scratchers, and said, that's not what our district is. It's not what our school system needs. I think I'm the right guy to run again. So.
Now, you fell short in the last race by a fraction of the votes.
I did.
As I recall, it was 27 votes?
It was 27 on the night of, and then subsequently when some other votes were counted, it became 37 votes.
Okay. So what that means to me and to anyone who's watching is not only does your vote count, but your vote could actually make a huge difference. A lot of these races that are at the local level, the municipal level, really come down to the neighborhoods, come down to the families, the individual streets, where each of those votes is crucial to getting a candidate across that finish line. So less than 40 votes could have changed the entire structure of HISD these past 2 years.
At least this past year.
Yeah,
for
this
sure.
past year, for sure, yeah. Now, where did you go to school?
So my undergraduate degree is in George Washington University, Washington, D.C., and then the University of Texas, I got my master's degree, and then worked in Southern California for 3 years, and then went to law school in Syracuse, New York.
Okay. And, so what gives you the passion for educational involvement? Because this is something that a lot of people don't look at, and in terms of political involvement and political advocacy. Sometimes they try to go through the legislative route. Sometimes they try to go through the municipal route. You've chosen to really hit hard the education front and try to affect positive change there. What motivates that?
So I think the motivation is the system and the board is so dysfunctional that the only way I think you can get in there and fix it is to be a part of it.
Right.
And so, you know, you can't stand on the sideline and say, why would you do that? It's dysfunctional. Like, I think that's the whole point of having elections, and is to try to fix the system. And so, you know, Harvin was working really hard for as long as it was. Greg Myers, Mike Lunsford, Anna Eastman, those were folks that were trying to make change. And so various ones are stepping down, and it's time for new folks to come in and continue what they were trying to do. And I saw that and started talking with folks, and that's how I wound up where I am.
Okay. Now, in terms of the current campaign, you've gotten an early start on getting out to the ground game, getting involved with these local efforts to get as many people aware of the issue as possible. How are things looking on that front?
So it's looking very, very good. I think the bigger issue is that there's not much on the ballot. So I think a lot of folks just don't recognize that there's an election that starts on Monday, really.
A lot of people are not really aware of that. Early voting starts Monday.
And so I think that was the inertia. Sadly, we've all had to deal with Hurricane Harvey.
Right.
And so this is an atypical, to say the least, election cycle. You know, one, it's the odd year, but two, there's a lot of folks out there hurting. And so, you know, we're out there helping them, folks, you know, like yourself and others, helping folks that have been affected by it. So no one's really thinking about the election. So we finally have turned to it and said, hey, look, we got to take not a hiatus from helping folks, but we need to figure out where our future is in the politics side of this, or the running for office. Let's get that done. And get the message out. So that's what we've been doing, and it is hard, but things are going well. I mean, people are making phone calls on my behalf, and others getting out and block walking. They're getting signs out. So the message is getting out. The social media like this, things are moving afoot, and we've got 2.5 weeks before the actual election day.
Yeah. Now, what you're bringing to HISD, what you would like to bring to the board, is distinctly different and a departure from the current occupant, the incumbent who you're challenging.
Sure.
So walk us through some of those big differences.
So I'm all about accountability, neighborhood schools, merit-based pay for teachers, and getting, obviously making sure that kids are college ready, but at the same time, 75% of the kids will not go to college, so having businesses help with the educational side of that. So sort of the trades, if you will, getting the trades back and up and running. So we've had a series of votes, or she's had a series of votes that are dramatically different than how I would have voted. I'm about accountability. Ann Sung, who's my opponent, voted to have a $107 million budget deficit. So we had to tap into the rainy day fund, and that was before it rained. And so we had this big flood, and that's what rainy days are for, not for floods, but for these tight moments where we need money. And so we're $107 million in the hole. I think it was a kick the can past the election type thing, because now, when I'm elected, when you all get out there and elect me, I've got to deal with $107 million of budget deficit. Not to mention the fact that, as a HISD, we should be asking to get reassessments on those properties. So the money that we'll have will be even less, right? Reassess all those folks that got flooded. And so the money, we should be asking, the appraiser to do that and figure out for these folks what their bill should be. And then, so it's not $107 million, it's going to be a lot bigger than that.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot bigger than that. So, but my opponent voted for a budget deficit. She also, the LBB, Legislative Budget Board, was going to come in and do a performance review. And shockingly, in my opinion, they voted to say no to that. I mean, why not? We've got systems that aren't working. Let's find out why. And then the other part was, as you know, Robin Hood. Robin Hood, it was the recapture and putting that back on the ballot. It came to the board. Should we give it back to the folks, give it back to the people to vote on? It was a 5-3-1 vote. Ann abstained from voting completely. I mean, she didn't even engage in the game. It's the fourth quarter, and the coach says, here's the ball. And she says, no, I'll just stand on the sidelines. You all figure it out. So those votes right there are sort of like, I have conviction, and I may be wrong sometimes, but at least you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And so it was frustrating to see our representative or our HISD board representative, trustee, not representing what folks at Center are there for.
Well, that begs the question: and whose interests is Ansung representing?
So she's definitely a union candidate. When she gave her speech last year, her acceptance speech or her victory speech on the night in December, we saw it. Someone did a live deal and we watched it. And the first people she thanked were the AFL-CIO. And she, right from the beginning, you were with me and I was with you. And so she's about jobs. I'm about the kids and getting money to the kids, getting money to the schools, and she's about jobs.
Do you have do you have a history of being involved with the schools that you can point to as far as like, here's where it began and here's where I started seeing these problems? Or what problems have you started seeing that because obviously you're passionate about this because you take an active interest, but what's the root of all that?
So it's interesting. My kids are in Briar Grove Elementary School, and got involved on the Dad's Club side of it, which is sort of the raise money social event of the PTO sort of things, helping out with PTO, and got involved with that, became the president of that, got involved at the executive level and the PTO, and you could see some of the issues the schools were having, budgetary issues, not getting enough money, central office telling them what they had to have, like a nurse or a librarian and things like that when they didn't need it, and so therefore it was taking money away from teaching and programs. And so that's what we're all about. We're about to educate all those kids. So I started to see all that, and then, like I said, when Harvin stepped down or was stepping down, started to talk to him about this and running, and that's how it all sort of took off.
Okay. The as I said earlier, the early voting starts Monday, October 23rd. So there's not a whole lot of time to prepare. That's one of the reasons why we've been starting to do this here at the HCRP studio, is bringing candidates directly to the voters so that they can engage on the issues and talk to you about their vision for the office. Speaking of which, what is your vision? I mean, obviously you have an entirely diametrically opposed viewpoint from the incumbent. You have an ideological view that has a different endpoint from her. So what's your vision for your involvement as a trustee?
So, we all have to work well together in the sandbox, right? I think that has fundamentally been missing from this board for a little while, and we have to go back to that. And we have to be able to say, look, neighborhood schools are how this thing should function. The principal and the teachers and the parents should decide the type of programs that we want. And so that's different than my opponent, whose central office says we need to have these particular positions and these particular programs. I think it's a decentralization is mine. It's kind of like Washington telling Texas how to run their business. We don't like that in Texas, and we certainly don't like it at the school level, at the neighborhood school level. The other, several other things, teacher merit-based pay.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone should be lockstep. I mean, you're not lockstep in your business. I'm not in mine. It's client-driven. It is outcome determinative. We should be able to do that with the schools, and I think the teachers would appreciate that. And I hear the argument like, well, they won't collaborate. So you and I collaborate, even though we're in the same office, and our outcomes are determined by how well we do. So there's that. We've got the big issue, obviously, is TEA taking over. We need to make sure that those failing schools get off the failing school list.
There's a huge risk.
It's a huge risk.
Yeah.
And so that is the driver right now. I mean, is that, and then the budget right behind it. But we got to get those schools off that list, because otherwise TEA could come in and take over the whole thing, which raises a very interesting point of, as you know, HISD, your tax bill that you have to pay every year, more than half of it comes from HISD. Well, if TEA takes over, I don't know, there's no representation there,
right.
So they'll be taxing without that. So we cannot let TEA take over. We have this mandate to get these schools off the list.
One thing that I know as a candidate you're going to encounter, because running for office is very different from running the office once you get there.
Right.
Those are two different things. And so for you, it's going to be a little bit of a culture shock because you come from a background and you come from an environment where there's lots of collaboration. The best ideas emerge. People find consensus around things at work. There has to be justification for things. You have accountability. You have responsibility. A lot of those things are lacking when it comes to a place like HISD. So obviously your arrival would shake things up a bit. And you just said that you like collaborating. So how do you find the balance between those two things? Because you're going to have to go in there and make dramatic changes to the operation at the same time as you're working with a lot of other people who are elected the same way as you are.
Sure. So I like to think that I can collaborate with just about anybody, right? We, as Reagan said, 80%, if we agree 80% of the time, we're friends, right? And I think that if we fundamentally keep an eye on the ball, and the eye on the ball is educating the kids, right? If we can do that, and we can get everybody on the same page with that, and every time we get together, it's like, look, how does this benefit Billy over here, Sally over there, and Jane over there? How does it benefit all of y'all? I think we can get this done. I just firmly believe that we can all work together to get this done. We may fundamentally differ on certain things and how certain things get done, but I think getting the money to the schools, getting those schools up and running, making sure we don't have failing schools in any district, those are all tenets that we all want to live by and make sure those kids. And I think if we can break down these barriers artificially put in there, that we can do well. And I firmly believe that I can do that.
What do you see as the long-term future of HISD? Part of the problem that has been coming up is some schools do exceptionally well, and some schools are on the verge of closing because they're just failing so completely. I mean, obviously that problem has many causes, but in terms of a long-term viability, what do you see as being a solution to that ongoing issue? Because the problem we face is parents, are going to start to avoid some of these schools that are failing, and then very soon you're going to have a situation where it's not sustainable.
Right. So you hear this term equity bounced around a lot. Some schools are doing well, others aren't, and so there's some advocacy, and it logically doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It's like, okay, let's take money from this school to make this school better. It's sort of like punching a hole in a boat that's floating to raise a boat that's got a hole in it. It just doesn't work, right? So what we need to do with the schools, and I have no silver bullet, but the idea is the failing schools or the schools that need improvement, partner with people. Yeah. Partner with the charter schools. Partner with
so there are options.
Nonprofits, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we are the fourth largest city in America. We deserve the best education for our kids. There are other cities that have faced similar issues and managed to resolve them, and they've done it through partnerships. They've done it with charter schools. They've been able to do that. We're Houston, Texas. We're Texas. We can get this done.
You're going to be coming into an organization that is extensively diverse, and is growing more diverse on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
In terms of comparing HISD to some of these other school districts that are surrounding HISD, what can HISD do better in terms of things that you're seeing? What's a couple of areas that we can immediately improve on?
Well, I mean, I think finding out what works in other areas, right? Other school districts, and what works within our own. I mean, because there are some very, very good schools in HISD. There's a lot of good schools in HISD.
There's a lot of exemplary schools, yeah.
And so the sad thing is when we're having these conversations, we're focused on the ones that aren't doing well. There are a lot that are doing very well. And so we need to be able to go in there and see what's working here.
Yeah.
And why won't it work over here? And how can we get the folks that are making this work over here, folks like them, to get work over here and raise everybody, raise that boat up. And so I think best practices that have happened in the schools that are very successful. And I do believe that having community involvement, business involvement will help that dramatically. Because when you bring a business perspective to it, you get away from, you bring the accountability, you bring that sort of system to the schools, and it should work.
We've been speaking with John Luman. He's a candidate for HISD Trustee District 7. He's running in this November's election. Early voting begins on October 23rd. Anything else you want to say to voters? I mean, obviously, get out and vote.
Get out and vote. I really appreciate all the support y'all have been giving me, and let's go show it at the polls, and let's win this thing. There's 6 seats that are up. It is, mine, and hopefully, if you're watching this, I'm on your ballot, and you get out and vote for me. There's 5 others after me, and let's get out and vote for them, and let's change the trajectory of the board, and let's have the TEA come in and say things are different. Houston, Texas, we're proud of your schools. Your schools are off the failing list. Let's get moving forward.
Are you going to be anywhere soon where if voters wanted to meet with you? Like, are you going to be at any events coming up that voters want to meet with you?
We've got several events coming up. One's on Monday night. It's a meet and greet at someone's house.
They can check his
check the
email website.
Yeah, my website is www.johnluman.com. Facebook is John Luman for HISD. And so they're on both of those. Okay. And then some block walking's coming up hopefully this Sunday if it doesn't rain, and then we'll have continued block walks and get out the votes for the next 2.5 weeks.
I know here at the HCRP headquarters we have a phone bank that's beginning tonight, I think at 4 p.m. and we have another one that's on Saturday starting at 10 a.m. That are going to be making phone calls for John Luman and the other candidates who are endorsed by the HCRP. If you're available to come out to any of those phone banks or any of the block walks that John was talking about, check the HCRP HarrisCountyGOP.com website for our calendar. You'll be able to sign up for any of those events and help get our candidates across the finish line this November. Again, early voting begins on October 23rd. Vote early if you can. That way you can spend the rest of the election season block walking and phone banking on behalf of the candidates. Until the next time, this is I'm Vlad Davidjak, joined with John Luman here in the HCRP studios. We'll see you.